Buenos días a todas y todos. Mi nombre es Jessica Morán, soy especialista de la Dirección General.
I'm a specialist from the General Education Direction, the Direction of Citizenship and Environmental Information in the Ministry of the Environment. Before we get started, we would like to remind you that we have interpretation services into Quechua, English, and Peruvian Sign Language. If you wish to access to one of these interpretation services, please use the event's virtual platform. Now, once again, welcome to the fourth day of the fourth International Circular Economy Forum. It is a pleasure to have your presence here with us today. This important event is organized with the purpose of inspiring, dynamizing, and articulating the public and private sector, the academia, and the civil society in the movement towards a just, decentralized transition towards a circular economy in Peru and in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. This year, it's been organized by the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Production, the Ministry of Agricultural Development and Irrigation, and the European Union in Peru. Likewise, the forum has a number of co-organizers who have joined, among which the German Cooperation, GIZ, the Swedish Embassy in Lima, the Danish Embassy in Peru, the Commission for the Promotion of Peru for Exports and Tourism from Peru, the National Industry Society, the Coalition of Circular Economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Peruvian company Simba. Other collaborators who have joined us are the Finnish Embassy, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, KAS Peru, Hans Seidel Stiftung, the Association of Agricultural Producers Unions of Peru, and the Environmental and Health Engineering chapter of the Departmental Council of Lima from the Engineers Association of Peru. We would like to thank the organizers, co-organizers, and collaborators the authorities, the presenters, the moderators, and the panelists who will be taking part in our event today, as in the previous days of the event. And we would also like to thank the entire team who has made the development of this fourth edition of the forum possible. Today, we will have 4 activities. We will begin with a plenary entitled Circular Economy, Fair Revenue and Decent Employment. Second, we have a roundtable entitled Cooperativism and Circular Economy. Third, the challenge, Formalizing the Recycling Industry in Peru, co-hosted by the National Industry Society. And lastly, the workshop Circular Economy, from Theory to Environmental Cost Management, co-organized from Peru. The links to sign up for the challenge and the workshop are available on the program that you can find on the event's virtual platform. We would like to invite you to also share your comments and questions through the chat on the forum's virtual platform. May I also remind you that on this platform, you will have the possibility of accessing the virtual exhibition and the parallel events or side events. Now, without any further ado, let's get started with the first activity of today, circular economy, fair revenue, and decent employment. To that end, we would like to invite Mrs. Ana Belén Sánchez, the coordinator of Foundations for Climate within the Spanish Foundations Association, who will be dealing with the subject effects of circular economy on income and employment. Mrs. Sánchez, welcome. All yours.
Perdón. Ahí estamos, perdona, que no había activado el audio. Muchas gracias.
I'm sorry, I had forgotten to turn on my microphone. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you. And congratulations on the event you organized. The program is absolutely amazing. I'll get started right away because we do not have much time. I'm going to share my screen.
Yo creo que ya debe estar.
I think you should be seeing it by now. I'm going to activate the presentation mode, and here we go. I'm here as a representative of Foundations for Climate, which is an initiative that we are leading from the Spanish Foundations Association in Spain, and we work with the philanthropy section. But my presentation deals rather with my expertise on just transition and green employment, and it's not so much related to my job as a coordinator of Foundation for Climate. So I'm going to start with the main messages to make sure the ideas that I have to convey are clear. What do we know about decent jobs in circular economy? Well, first and foremost, we know that our impact on the work market has several dimensions. There will be the creation of jobs, the destruction, and then there will be 2 interesting sorts of impacts, which are the replacement and the redefinition of employment. What this means is that the jobs market is going to change a lot and in many various ways. So it is necessary to identify what the direction of each of the strategies and the plans that we implement is going to be. Otherwise, we risk having a job market that doesn't work well, and therefore not having enough companies or not having enough personnel, having low income, increasing poverty, and an entire series of effects. Another deep change is a change in skills, professional skills. And given that circular economy touches all economic sectors, the impact will be very deep because it will have an impact on many professions within the great variety of economic sectors. And we'll deal with that later. So what we need here is to retrain some people entirely, people who work with these new professions. And we will need to readapt that training they have, which we call reskilling. What else do we know? Well, the private sector needs to change because we need companies who work with the new paradigm of circular economy. It is no longer linear as it was thus far, and companies need to go on working with the new paradigm and not with the previous one, which is no longer valid. So the tools they have do not work anymore. They're not feed. They will need new technologies. And when we discuss industrial symbiosis, we'll see that we need the companies to strike new relationships between themselves, where the input for one comes from the waste of another, and so on. So unions also need to adapt. Workers need to adapt. Circular economy presents a new work space, a new job market for them, and they need to understand the challenges. They're not self-evident, and they will need to sit down, analyze, study, identify, and examine each of the proposals to be able to move forward with circular economy and to understand what the impact on workers is going to be and what the role of the unions as their representatives could therefore be. In some countries, we suggest the creation of environmental committees and environmental unions within the companies or the sectors in order to work on a social dialogue in this framework. One other related point is the fact that work relationships change, they must adapt. We have new conventions, new spaces for social dialogue, which are already under development, or they should be if they haven't gotten started yet. And so circular economy has a matter of particular importance associated to it. I haven't dedicated a lot of time in my presentation to it. Others may do it, but we see that the relationships between the different stakeholders within a community change very much. So this is one of the main characteristics to be taken into account because they have an impact on employment within circular economy. What else do we need then? And with this, we will conclude our main takeaways. This is a priority. We need new standards, new frameworks for the environment, for employment, but also frameworks that relate the two, the environmental and the employment, and to do it in an efficient, consistent way. I have added here a number of images in order for us to be able to draw examples on what the impact of circular economy would be. This is a piece of news from a few days ago, which says jeans recycled can be used as acoustic isolation or thermal isolation in buildings. When we talk of jeans, we speak of natural fibers, cotton, and other kinds of textiles. So we see that these natural textiles and fibers can be used as a construction material. This will create new jobs in collection, in handling, and in reprocessing textiles and other sorts of natural fibers, as I was saying. So what is the employment that is replaced? Well, the kind of employment that's being created in the production of glass fiber, which is usually used in constructions as isolation. So there's a new value chain, and what we need to see here is new companies, new suppliers, new commercial relationships, new trade spaces, new commercial areas. So this new approach can be of use to localize production, and that is very interesting in the context of the COVID pandemic. So what do we need? We need a new training because we do not know how this new material can be used for the construction sector. And then there's also employment in research and innovation, and that's very important as well. This new example is somewhat different from what we usually see, but that is why I have included it, because I think it is of interest here. And that is using the concept of bioeconomy to reduce soil pollution. So what we suggest here is to use a combination of vegetable production, that is of some plants such as rape, wheat, mustard, or others, and to combine it with coal. And so what they do with this is to extract the materials that pollute and contaminate the soils. So first, we can use contaminated areas. We can reuse those materials, which are very expensive very often, but are very valuable in the market, such as nickel or chromium. We do not identify a replacement of jobs. These are spaces where we couldn't do anything and they are now re-enabled. Of course, there is a new sub-chain of value within the agriculture and mining industries because we need that knowledge. And this is all based on research and innovation. So as you see, the idea of circular economy can be as broad as you can fathom it to be, but we need this kind of knowledge to be available to everyone so that we can understand how communities and companies can better adapt. Some information, I'm not sure whether or not you are aware of this, but very quickly, according to the ILO, the circular economy will create 6 million new jobs in an unambitious circular economy framework. So if we make sure circular economy grows a bit, we could generate 6 million new jobs. Almost 5 million out of these 6 million new jobs would be based in Latin America. And here you have a rough idea on how this would work in certain European countries. So 400,000 in Spain, 500,000 in France. I don't personally get a clear idea out of figures. What I'm interested in is knowing what is behind the figures. Is it men, women, formal or informal economy, what the salaries are, what their conditions are, the working conditions are. So it's not that I would like to base myself on the figures, but it does give you a rough idea of the scale. Finally, we estimate 2 million recyclers to be actually working in the informal economy in Latin America with very uneven revenues and with working conditions that are very hard. So opposite this, we would like to suggest a just transition approach, which proposes first and foremost to make sure decent work is at the center of the transition. So if we make it central, we need to pay attention to the new jobs created and make sure that the working conditions are good. And the jobs that could be destroyed, well, we need to make sure those companies and those people have an alternative, whether it be in the new jobs that are created or in other sectors. Another idea stemming from just transition is that circular economy should not perpetuate the existing inequalities in the linear economy model. And there, I would like to discuss with you the gender approach. According to the ILO and the IDB, currently 80% of green jobs in Latin America come from sectors where most employees are men. So if circular economy is to repeat the model, we will have sustainable green circular economy, but it'll be very uneven and women will not have any role to play there. Other issues of importance that I would like to stress are social protection and the formalization of employment. Some countries in the region have already made some great headway, such as Peru, which is working on residues from electric and electronic waste, as is the case of Chile and Uruguay as well. So it's not easy to do, but it can be done. Some questions of interest. I'm going to accelerate a bit because otherwise I won't have enough time. You'll be able to read the reports on your own later. So renewable energies, water, waste, construction services, the industry, agriculture and plants growing, transport, tourism, and extractive industries. So as I was saying at the beginning of my presentation, all economic sectors will be affected or benefited or can benefit from this. A few words on the skills I mentioned earlier. We would have to see what the skills are at the mid-level and low level, because according to the impact on those skills for a greener future, we will have to develop answers. So we would have to see what the training programs are, what the measures to adapt would be. So you have certain examples here, such as complete university programs, and in certain cases, adaptation programs that can be taken even at the workplace. Some of the main challenges we have in terms of skills for green jobs, we have a lack of integration between work policies, education, and environmental policies, which leads to having a weak consistency between policy objectives. So the policies for work, for education, and for the environment each move forward in a different way, and they do not have many points of intersection, which needs to improve. We have to make them align. Then another issue of importance is the deficit of skills for the green economy and for popular economy in the sectors that I mentioned, although we are improving internationally. I said it'll have an impact on all sectors. And lastly, something that's very complicated to work with, but that must be taken into consideration is the fact that green technology is constantly changing. We keep seeing new technologies with green hydrogen, solar power, electric vehicles, biodegradable materials appear, and we need to adapt. And to conclude, I wanted to mention some interesting reports from the ILO, because that's where I was working over the past few years, and that's what I best know. But other organizations have also published their own reports, which are worth a read. All of these reports are available by accessing the URLs that I have added at the end of my presentation. So we will make sure to get them to you. This is employment in future net zero emissions in Latin America and the Caribbean from the IDB. This is a report that was recently published in Colombia, how to boost the creation of green jobs in circular economy. And I also wanted to present this one from Mexico that was very recently published, where we analyzed 5 green sectors within the framework of the recovery of jobs and the just transition. This one deals with food specifically, but there are 4 others as well. And finally, we have this report from Argentina, which is green reconstruction, the progress of circular economy towards the just transition in Argentina. There are others, but these are the ones I thought would be of interest. And that is the end of my presentation. Jessica Moran speaking. Thank you very much, Ana Belén, for having participated. We would like to remind the audience that at the end of the presentations, there will be a Q&A section. So you can send your questions on the forum's virtual platform chat. We would now like to welcome Mr. Luis Sosa, a research analyst from the Circular Jobs Initiative by Circle Economy from the Kingdom of the Netherlands, who will discuss with us the Circular Jobs Initiative by Circle Economy. Mr. Luis Sosa, go ahead. Luis Sosa speaking. Thank you very much, Jessica, for introducing me. I would like to echo Ana Belén's congratulations. The efforts of the Peruvian government in organizing this forum are remarkable, and hopefully in the near future, many more countries will join in and research as you're doing circular economy. I would also like to share my screen as I have a presentation. I hope you will see my screen, and it will deal with what we do at Circle Economy. Allow me to share my screen first. I'll be a moment. I appreciate your patience.
Bien, perfecto, ahora sí.
There we are. First of all, I would like to open the discussion and ask you, why do we speak of circular economy internationally, not only at Circle Economy? Well, because there's something that's evident and that we've seen over the past few weeks with all the media coverage of the COP26, and that is the fact that the world consumes 100 billion tons of materials a year. And if we compare it to the temperatures we used to have at the time of the Industrial Revolution, we have seen a temperature rise of 1 degree, and that is the mean global temperature. Likewise, there are millions of people who are jobless, who are living a work poverty. About 5% in the working age, 5% of the population in the working age experiences this kind of issue. That's roughly 90 million people around the world. And An estimate of 90% of the total CO2 emissions come from 10 industries, which only account for 16% of jobs. In her presentation, Ana Belén mentioned a few of them. The extractive industries are the main ones, as are the construction industries, because they are great emitters of CO2. In some countries, the construction practices are trying to shift towards circular economy. We have seen that internationally, in the countries that have already made their pledge in terms of their emissions to bridge the emissions gap, the result is that from the business as usual scenario, if nothing is done, by 2050, roughly, the global temperature could increase between 3 and 6 degrees. If these nationally determined contributions are implemented, the emissions gap will be bridged by 15%. So that would be about 2 to 3% above current levels by 2050. However, according to our models and the models of a number of institutions, we see that the use of circular economy as a factor to encourage those nationally determined contributions and their reduction, we could bridge the gap and reach the objectives that have been set at the planet level. So 1.5, 1.8 degrees above in the Industrial Revolution levels.
Sabemos que la economía circular nos puede ayudar a fortalecer regiones, pero además a fortalecer el empleo. Nos puede ayudar también a lograr los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible que a nivel internacional se han
Etienne,
planteado.
estás en el canal de español.
Sorry, it can assist us in SDGs, decent jobs, growth, to make sure that the cities and communities have a sustainable future, and also to start, or rather to continue the path of changing the population's chip when there is a responsible consumption, sustainable responsible has not been achieved, and also from the production side to try and find economic incentives of a different nature. So what do we do in the circular economy, especially in the circular jobs? Well, what we are after is to foster this border of knowledge, and within this specifically we are looking for a positive transition of circular economy towards more jobs and better jobs. To do so, we have an approach that is based upon 3 different pillars. One, we try to have to close the knowledge divide on social impacts through from the research, from even research on at the office, of course, but also we also do field jobs. We try to provide our clients with digital tools that would allow them, first of all, to measure. And once they have measured, to learn from the best practices from others and comparing with other territories. And finally, we use a method that we call the circle scan. This is mapping the strategies that should be priority for a city, for a region, for a country. In the material inflow, where are the main opportunities in terms of contamination and CO2 contribution, but also how, if we try for these areas to lower their contribution, what would be the impact on employment, and at the same time, how can we make sure we have a proper transition so that those jobs that are at risk of being lost because some of the industries are bound to lower their production. For example, the fossil fuel industries, how can we manage for retrain those workers and place them elsewhere? We have three specialization areas within the Circular Jobs Initiative. The first one is training of the labor force, and that is the population which is already working and which is at risk of losing the jobs, the industries that are requesting more jobs because of this circular transition, and also we are thinking about the youth that decides to choose on a professional jobs, or those that have gone to college and that are also starting to be on the labor market, and they also need to have this circular economy approach. Second, decent jobs. We want the labor conditions in those cases that we have been analyzing be improved through a better security on the job place, just the salaries, and above all, a greater integration of the workforces in the decision-making process and on the future of the different activities and industries. And finally, the inclusive labor opportunities. This has been mentioned a few minutes ago before with the person that spoke before me. There is a need, everybody knows that, to make the labor market more inclusive for women, to make it more inclusive for the young, the Latin American markets. They have a big problem of unemployment, informality, and inequality and salary divides. This is something that we have to resolve somehow. Another thing that we try to do is to define what a circular job is. At an international level, there are a number of definitions. There is not a silver bullet, so to speak, nothing that is universal, but we are working on this topic, and we are doing that with the UN and the United Nations Environment Program. For us, any job that involves one of the elements of the circular economy or that is being supported by those. So you will ask, what are those? Well, I'll show you this in a second. We classify this in core, enabling, or circular, indirectly. So what are they? The core elements, we divide or we classify the different economic sectors using 8 elements. 3 that are central, those are the core elements. That is to prioritize renewable resources, to extend the shelf life, and using the waste as a resource. And you can see the number of jobs that are within each of these classifications. Then we have the enabling elements. This is to design, rethink, revisit the business model, include digital technology, make a team to create value, and strengthen the knowledge base. These are 2 important examples. As far as extending the life cycle, there are a number of companies at an international level that are already implementing these strategies. Patagonia is a very clear example of how you can work under a business model where the quality is still there, but you extend the shelf life of the products. They already have these services, and they also have services whereby they sell used clothes. On the other hand, strengthening the knowledge base, here we are talking about circular thoughts in learning and training. Teachers are an essential part of these new generations, and they also have to retrain the workers. And here a big challenge relates to the limitations that the educational systems in the countries or regions may have. These are difficulties that have been there for some time, but we have to understand what they are if we really want to tackle the circular economy issue. Once this has been defined, what we try to do is to locate them and to introduce them to our audience so that they can have an image and they can compare the numbers of circular economy. What are the percentages of labor jobs that are circular in the world, in the country, in the region, and in the city? We have a tool that is called the Circular Jobs Monitor. This tool maps the number and type of job within the circular economy. And what we do is we have more than 2,000 industrial sectors, and we divide them according to the factors that I mentioned before. This will provide us a benchmark to assess the progress of circular economy in the upcoming years. We are just now starting to measure, so right now it is a little bit early to talk about assessing. We don't have enough backlight, so to speak. But I'm sure that as we move on and we have more observations, so by using this kind of tool, we will be able to measure the progress of circular economy in different areas. And this tool, of course, means what the trend is in circular economy. And I'm taking advantage of this to say that this tool will be relaunched in a few weeks. In December, we will relaunch the Circular Jobs Monitor in more than 100 cities in Latin America. I think that here, again, there's a very, very good opportunity to keep on cooperating with Peru and to find ways to add cities to our network and the measurements of circular economy within this Circular Jobs Monitor. And finally, I would like to say what we have done with Peru in prior months. Circular economy has been sitting down with the government of Peru to try and sketch. It's a very preliminary sketch, but to see what the vision could be. What are the elements of the roadmap, and to identify the priorities that Peru has. Here are some: agriculture, cattle, forestry, fisheries, and aquaculture. I invite you to review the various reports that we have published. There are some that are international, like the Circular Pickup Report. We have others that are regional. Many of them are only European, but little by little, we are getting into other countries. Very soon, Latin America, by the way. We also have reports on strategies for vocational training and strategies to make sure that within the circular economy, the decent jobs issue is taken into account, and that this becomes something real, tangible, something that we really count on. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you. We thank Mr. Luis Sosa for his presentation. Remember that any comment or consultation, you can always write to the chat of the Zoom platform. Now we welcome Mrs. Paula Rios, who is a consultant of the Externado University of Colombia, who will introduce her research, Industrial Symbiosis Networks and Employment, the Colombian case. Good morning, Mrs. Rios. You have the floor. Good morning. Thank you for this invitation. I will introduce you to my screen so that I can show you this research that we have carried out. This research was carried out, funded by the ILO, and I did it with a colleague called Esmeralda Rodriguez and Ana Belena, that was with us a few minutes ago, also participated. This industrial symbiosis networks is a specific case of circular economy, and we will tell you about the Colombian experience. This work has a number of elements, so I will try and see them a little bit at a glance because it is quite hefty. Let me tell you what the reasoning or the rationale behind the work is, an approach, a conceptual approach to have some definition, to see what we have seen over the history of Colombia on the development of such symbiosis, the methodology, the results, and finally some conclusions and recommendations. The person who took the floor before have told us what the importance is of researching the impact on jobs, of the transition to more sustainable productive systems. And that is one, of course, of the reasoning for starting this job. We also realized that there are not too many studies on this topic in Latin America, and that if we take the literature worldwide, not much is being said about the social impact and the employment impact of this model of circular economy. So again, it is irrelevant to talk about this here. So this is just to frame a little bit what we understand by industrial symbiosis. This is understood as the physical exchange of materials, energy, water, and byproducts. And the goal is to increase the production without having to increase energy expenditures or resource expenditure, and thanks to cooperation between companies. So you can imagine a number of exchanges that are possible, byproducts. Maybe you can share public services, or there are joint services that are being provided. We can also see symbiosis as a function of the place where the exchange is taking place. For example, within a company or an area, or the most known system are the eco-industrial parks. Also local companies or companies that are located in wider areas, which do not necessarily have to be next to each other for this cooperation to take place. This in terms of conceptual framework. We also studied in the literature what the social advantages were. We see that there can be creation of new jobs and businesses. Also, you can retain some workers. You can also create some activities that lead the workers to stay in the companies. There can also be a knowledge transfer and a development of local economies, like improvement in health, work, and training. And likewise, we wonder what are the mechanisms of creation and retention of jobs, because these mechanisms of cooperation exist, granted, but we want to know how you can get more jobs. And we saw that the literature was telling us that you can have an increase in the number of activities, or you can do savings in a company that will allow them to bring on board more people, or you can have an increase in production levels. That is what we will be researching now. There can also be new businesses. And to see what happens in Colombia, we did some research in the different laws enacted. And there is no concrete example, although since 1997, they started to talk about clean production, but the term as such is not there. In 2016, we started to talk in Colombia about circular economy, and 2018, we talk about industrial symbiosis. We have also seen some other private initiatives, such is the case as of SCAR, the ESCAR network, which is an initiative of a Colombian university and a public institution in Colombia that in 2013 started, and as of 2017 they started to work on network, which were actual industrial symbiosis. They called on big companies that anchor company, they connect with others and they sit them down and said, these are our possibilities of cooperation. Another thing that we saw is that of the industrial UN industrial UNIDO in English. So we started to research with the manufacturing survey to gather some information. For example, the participation of the companies that use waste as a raw material, and we discovered that this is 8.5% of companies in Colombia do so, and they are concentrated around the food and beverage sector, mineral, non-metal products, and rubber and plastic. And here we have the same materials, rubber and plastic. When we are taking a look about who is marketing waste, who's selling waste. So the percentage is very low. Only 2.7% of the industry in Colombia really works on marketing waste. With these numbers, we can see that the phenomenon is very, very slow. Also, if we take into account the legal issues at stake and other private initiatives, until now, it was not very well known. So what we wanted to do was to find out what were the impact on jobs of these networks. On the one hand, we carried out some case studies to gather primary information, and we used some networks that already existed under the ESCAR network, and then we did some questionnaires, to understand how certain indicators exist. And we also carried out interviews to enrich the study with key stakeholders of these initiatives of the national government in Colombia, also the largest association of employers, ANDI, and we saw a particular case in the UNIDO project, which is in a tax-free zone of Colombia. They have some very interesting cases, and we added them on board. And that's how you get to the next chart. And here some of the results. We chose 3 case studies. Each of them has some different characteristics. And I don't have much time, but you can see that this is quite a complex issue. And I will send you the link so that you can find a little bit more about the results achieved. But what we wanted to see what the mechanisms are. We saw that there are, as an input, there was savings, how many jobs, what kind of jobs were gained or lost in this industrial symbiosis network, and also the jobs lost or won, mainly won. I don't have much time. Here we have some other results relating to the key reporters, where we asked them how you can generate jobs, and that's how we understood that it means creating new activities if the companies grow. If some companies become more formal, that's also something that has to be taken into account. What kind of skills are necessary according to them? this is also something that we took into account. And to move to the conclusions and recommendations, the last part of this survey, we saw that when there's a job creation in the company, or when the purchase of inputs allows to expand, that's when you have possibilities to create jobs. So we saw cases that were told to us by the key reporters were a small company that started to have a new use of certain materials thanks to the fact that it connected to a large company. Well, that small company was no longer small, started to formalize and start to create higher quality jobs. There was another small company that provides environmental services, and because it joined a big company, they are working together and they are working in cooperation with a very large company here in Colombia, as I said, that provides food services. We again saw a considerable increase in job creation of this environmental services company. So, in a nutshell, these are some of the conclusions of the case studies. We also saw the retention of jobs, not everywhere, of course, but this is something that comes about with information of the key reporters who told us the creation of jobs depends on a number of factors, on the funding of the projects, on the existing of capacity to change within the company, the skills of the employees. And also, I wish to underscore that the development of new activities that did not exist before inside the companies can also lead to more jobs, to the growth of SMEs, and to the creation of new business lines can foster this. That is how we are generating a more sustainable mechanism for the production purposes, but we can also have positive impact on the well-being, both on the job side and the skills side. Here again, we have a collection of skills that were needed, and I think my time is over, so I invite you to see the study which is published on the website of the ILO, and you can have maps and details of the study. Thank you so very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Actually, this panel has been very interesting. We thank the participation of everybody. We want to say that during this plenary session, we have been able to identify the relationship between circular economy with income, employment, and likewise, it is also important to identify the conditions for the creation of decent jobs with just income during this transition towards this new model. We have also been able to see different initiatives in Peru, in the world, opportunities and challenges of circular economy for the creation of new jobs. We again wish to thank the speakers. Now we will start the second panel. During today's meeting, we will have a discussion panel that will be moderated by Mrs. Lourdes Fernandez, consultant of International and Ibero-American consulting company on administration public policies. We welcome her. Mrs. Fernandez, you have the floor. Thank you, Jessica. Good morning. It is a big pleasure for me to start this discussion panel. We have to say that the transition for a new model that is sustainable means a source of opportunities and challenges, as has been mentioned before, with direct consequences for the world of labor in what is seen as a just transition according to the ILO. It considers the creation of decent jobs and just income, but it also means security on the job place and social protection. It has the capacity, as has been said, to promoting decent jobs and just transition for new companies that become sustainable, that consider the principles of circular economy that are of the essence for chain value, sustainable income, and the promotion of green jobs. We have to take into account policies, competencies, green technology, not leave aside the gender approach and the opportunity to reduce the salary divide. Also, remember that the national contributions can assist us in reducing this divide and have a circular employment. In the panel, we will have the following participants whom I welcome. Mrs. Fanny Montellanos, General Director of Promotion and Employment of the Ministry of Work. Mrs. Veronica Bonifaz, Executive Vice President of the National Confederation of Private Companies in Peru. Mr. Eduardo Calvo, professor at the University of Chemistry of the San Marcos University. Mrs. Paloma Roldan, Executive Director of Sustainable City. I remind you that everybody has 4 minutes to answer the questions, and you will respond in the order that I mentioned you before. The first question is, what is your opinion on the presentations we heard, and where do you think we find the most important opportunities for the creation of decent jobs in Peru stemming from the implementation of circular economy? So I give the floor to Mrs. Fanny Montellanos first.
Good afternoon, Lourdes. Arturo Garcia speaking. I hope you can see me. I just wanted to clarify that Dr. Montellanos, the Director General for the Promotion of Employment, is not with us. She asked me to represent her. My name is Arturo Garcia. I direct the promotion of employment and self-employment. Lourdes and I have already met before. We have worked together on a number of endeavors, and I'm here to stand in replacement of Mrs. Montellanos. As for your question, Lourdes, I found that all the presentations were very interesting. I have been at work with Ana Belén coordinating an activity, so I already know the green employment aspect a bit, and we actually worked on green employment from the Ministry of Work, Ministry of Labor, and the Colombian experience was what I found very interesting. So from our perspective, we're always looking for public policy experiences that we can learn from to see what the positive lessons learned elsewhere are and how we can iterate what is being done well elsewhere. Anna also mentioned another document at the beginning, and I think we would have to look into further detail what we can use from all that. But in the case of Peru, in the middle of the year, in June, we agreed to publish a policy for decent jobs. Decent employment in Peru, according to the policy, interpreter apologizes. The speaker's sound is choppy.
Ingresos justos
So there are some variables that we think should be guaranteed. Fair wages, and some remarks regarding our relationship to just transition and what it should be, I think should be made. Because you're not just looking at the variables for an employee, you have to bear in mind that you need to fulfill a right transition, a just transition, and a transition towards green employment. That is the work at hand. From the Ministry of Employment, we have a document which defines what green jobs are and how they are in reality. So that's the line along which we're working. I appreciate the opportunity of seeing the development of these jobs within the framework of working with options related to green jobs. Currently, and I'm only just saying this in general terms because we do not yet have a design for this, but from the ministry, we would like to see how we work. The interpreter apologizes, the speaker's connection is unstable. We have seen the need to work with borders, with the edges, and that includes adolescents. And so in having a clear definition of what decent employment is, in working within the framework of the circular economy, we have already set some of the basics that we need for our work, and we'll see what else we can integrate to our jobs. Thank you, Lourdes. Lourdes Fernandez speaking. Thank you very much, Arturo. We will now move on to Mrs. Veronica Bonifaz.
Adelante, Verónica.
Sí, ¿qué tal? You can go ahead. Hi. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, we can. I thought it was choppy. Sorry. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Indeed, Ana Belén, Luis, and Paola made very interesting presentations and very interesting remarks as well. I wanted to comment on the breakthrough we've made in our country with public policies, with the General Waste Act, and other laws and regulations that are related to the promotion of circular economy, the Circular Economy Compact, for instance. So acknowledging this progress, I have thought of a number of comments to make regarding the presentations that were made. So first, we should try and make this diagnosis of the regulations that exist already and to make conciliation with the public policies per sector. The Ministry of the Environment has fostered all these initiatives and boosted circular economy in a cross-sectoral fashion, and we need to continue to do so in tourism, in production, in construction as well. Sometimes there are certain projects that we try to promote from the circular economy viewpoint, but there are other regulations that aren't equalized or that haven't been recognized following the same criterion. So that is a comment I wanted to make about the industry in general and regarding the existing opportunities to accelerate the pathway towards circular economy in the country. Secondly, I wanted to touch upon the importance of formalization in the labor market. We face a very complex situation in the country, given that nearly 80% of the population lives in informality. And as was said, it is important to identify what all these jobs which promote circular economy and that are part of the process are, but which have not yet advanced towards formalization, such as recycling. There's over 500,000 families who work and make a living out of recycling. And we believe we need to prioritize, encourage, boost what exists already by moving towards the formalization of those jobs to defend the rights of those families which are the most vulnerable in regular times and at times of crisis as well. I think that is very important. With gender equality outlook, with the protection of human rights in all value chains existing in the country already, we need to go on working in this fashion if we want to continue to advance towards circular economy. I also wanted to comment on something that we consider to be very important, and that is the reevaluation of waste in the food industry. In our country and in the world, the management of waste and food waste is very high. So from the circular economy viewpoint, we consider that it would be very important to consider this look, which would also have a social outlook and which would help mitigate the realities of the pandemic and the current situation in the country, but by generating new value chains as well and new businesses, new processes, new ways of transforming food, among other waste and important residues. So it is important to see what the diagnosis of the existing regulatory framework to have a cross-sectoral outlook on municipalities and local governments, the formalization of a group which is already working in these chain values and prioritizing and attaching greater value to the waste that is already generated and to generate more value and to take it to the national level by creating more mechanisms such as the clean promotion mechanisms that are being promoted by the different mechanisms. So I think we should reinforce this and go on working and promoting these sorts of mechanisms. And I would say over the past few months, the road towards circular economy has accelerated quite a bit with the Clean Energy Promotion Act from the Ministry of the Environment and others. And that is, I think, my take on the matter for now. Thank you, Veronica. Lourdes Fernandez speaking. We will now move on to Eduardo Calvo. Eduardo Calvo speaking, yes. Hello, and thank you, Lourdes. I would first like to thank the organizers for having invited the university to be a participant at this event. I would also like to congratulate presenters and panelists who preceded me for their interventions, and I would like to present a few considerations that I have been pondering regarding this matter. First, the participation of Ana Belén was eye-opening. I have the habit of taking part in these kinds of events where you would rather think it is marketing presentations. Everyone says how simple it is, how dumb we are because we're not doing it yet, and that it would actually be very simple to shift towards circular economy tomorrow. However, Ana Belén has presented us a hard road ahead, full of challenges, where there are opportunities, but which entails many challenges and many difficulties. And I think this balanced image is, to me, one of the strongest items in particular when we speak of a country that produces raw materials such as Peru. In our case, we must remind that there's going to be plenty of creation, but also destruction of jobs, and many cases of very little formal employment, as is the case nowadays. It must be said that another one of the great challenges, as the second presenter already mentioned, is labor poverty. That is, people who, even having a formal job, given the low wages paid, cannot afford to pay for their needs, even being employed. And that is particularly the case in the big cities, because we know the level of wages is not enough. So there is an aspect that presents an additional challenge. And we must also see what the second presenter was saying. For instance, we need to extend the life cycle of our products as a focal activity through repairs, for instance. Well, most corporations and international companies and most value chains that provide the industrial products to us, which are outside our jurisdiction, live by following the paradigm of planned obsolescence. And unless the issue is discussed at a global level, we will continue to receive products and equipment which year after year quickly become trash, in particular with electronics, which are very hard to recycle. In the third presentation, I liked very much seeing that the presenter dealt with the subject that I hadn't heard of for many years. Now it's come up again with circular economy, but it is issues regarding ecology and industrial symbiosis, which date back to when our economy wasn't industrialized. So it reminded me of my days in the classroom, and I'm glad that these ideas are coming back to life. And to conclude, I just wanted to point out that there are a number of aspects with which the academia could contribute, which would lead to the creation of decent jobs in circular economy, and that is the low human capital and the low existing productivity in our current economy. So maybe we could contribute with that discussion. Thank you for inviting me. Lourdes Fernandez speaking. Thank you, Eduardo. We will now give the floor to Mrs. Paloma Roldán. Paloma Roldán speaking. Hi, good morning, and thank you. I would also like to echo the congratulations that were already stated on the clarity of the space that was shared at first with presentations and the experience which underlies each of those proposals. I have taken 3 notes that I think are very important. I think they are very current. When Ana Belén shared with us the danger for the new circular economy models that can be applied to our realities, to perpetuate realities, I think it is extremely important, if we must consider that at this time of climate crisis, we must have a holistic view where we must understand the need to cross between different components and to see what isn't working. In our country and in Latin America in general, we have a lot of inequalities. And against the backdrop of the pandemic, we've had many more difficulties. It's been a real struggle for women in particular. And I think that is very important because it is also an opportunity. It presents the opportunity to turn it around and see how that gender component, which is so necessary, can be included in the different proposals that come out of the logics of decent employment, green jobs. And secondly, I think it is also very important to see what's going on and what's happening with the offer of training and education in formal terms, what the market expects, and then what the country needs in terms of circular economy. I completely agree with the fact that there is no real dialogue there. We're not having a specific reading on how to land public policies, because as Veronica was saying, there is a proposal. We have regulations that have been developed with a lot of work. They're very interesting, but without an intersectorial dialogue to make sure those public policies are rooted in our everyday lives and in the development of businesses, then we will be missing many options and opportunities. And what Luis Sosa shared from his institution is very interesting precisely on that, because it's something we lack in many cases, and that is the knowledge. We do not have the mapping or the real picture of what's going on, what the opportunities of decent employment within circular economy already are, what exists and what's missing, to identify the real gap, and of course to understand what's going on, not between the differences of what goes on in agriculture or the plastics industry, but that there must also be a crossing in terms of what goes on in the territory. And it is also very important to handle that in cultural terms around our reality as well. That needs analysis with a local flavor is precisely that which can help us achieve what Paola Rios was saying in terms of the social benefits of the creation of new jobs. In these times of pandemic, it's been very hard to reactivate some of the chains, such as that of recycling, for instance. And if there is an entire group of young entrepreneurs who wish to do their research on that, we can add up all the rest. And I'm thinking of the innovate employment, how to generate opportunities for there to be research and more generation of jobs and to make it work better. I think that is the biggest opportunity we have. If we speak of a series of young people who are unemployed currently and who need our support, and that can be an entire line of work that could be opened, but it also involves recyclers. In Latin America, we estimate 4 million people to be included in this activity. So how to include all these peoples, all these families in the process to advance with the logics? That is my answer for the first question. Lourdes Fernandez speaking. Thank you, Paloma, for your intervention. So summing up, the key messages on opportunities would be that we already have a national decent job policy, which adds circular economy and green employment. We have a document which defines green employment, and we are advancing with that. Although we have 80% of informality in the labor market, we need to identify in which sectors it is and see how circular economy can move towards formalization. One of our main priorities is adding value to waste. We need to see what the value chains are, what the process for new waste is, and see how we can interact with it. It is important to know that we have clean production agreements for the roadmaps of some sectors. On the other hand, we should reconsider the plan of obsolescence of industrial products, as Eduardo was saying, and the academia can, of course, contribute, as was said by our colleagues. Training is very important to generate the change that we aim towards, but also to readapt the skills that people already have, because they have the skills, but they need to adapt to the new technologies at hand. Circular economy models can tolerate inequalities, but the gender dimension is very important here. With informal jobs, it is very important, and the pandemic gives us a new opportunity. We can include green employment, green jobs, circular economy, but we need a real dialogue to make sure that we can land the public policies which exist already. There are regulations that need to be aligned in between sectors, and we need to organize the intersectoral dialogue to unite decent jobs, just transition, circular economy. And that's what we are aiming at. With this said, I would like to remind you once again that following the order of the introduction, each of the panelists will have 4 minutes to answer to the following question. So block 2. The question is, which are up to you the main, according to you, what are the main challenges to the generation of decent employment within the framework of the country's transition towards a circular economy? Once again, we will start with Mr. Arturo Garcia. You have the floor. Arturo Garcia speaking. Thank you, Lourdes. Well, speaking of challenges, it isn't easy to think of just one. And I'm going to go back to what Veronica mentioned, which is informality. And this is about knowing where the change process starts. As Paloma was saying, often we think of the relationship between work, companies, and education, and we do not have one holistic policy for all those important components that need to be integrated. I recognize myself that we have yet to integrate the educational offer from the Ministry of the Education and to see how to tie it into the labor market's demands. That is an issue that is unsolved to date. We're still working on it, and the decent employment policy goes along those lines, but it is still in work in progress. If I see the challenges we have, well, I think we need to find a way to change the productive matrix of Peru. One can easily speak of shifting towards green employment and circular economy, to think of training and skills. But we must see what is produced in the country. What is it that the market will demand of us? And in that sense, I think informality is a real issue. Currently, self-employment or independent workers represents millions of people. Although autonomous work is not informal, a large share of independent workers are informal because they haven't been able to always integrate into the market, and they end up doing simple jobs to survive. And we do not have the capability of absorbing that capital and that labor. So this human capital is either very deficient or the labor market is not big enough to integrate them. So the issue at hand is knowing how we can manage to make sure this informal labor would move forward to a decent employment condition by always maintaining the healthy economy measures. And I think that is the big challenge. How can we make sure the labor that we have can reach basic conditions such as access to health, to the pension system, to food, to education, to housing services. So I think that is our main challenge as a state in generating an integral government policy. So we need to sit down between the different sectors and put together something that works. Thank you. Lourdes speaking. Thank you, Arturo, for your comments. We will now hand the floor to Mrs. Veronica Bonifaz. Veronica Bonifaz speaking. Yes, thank you, Lourdes. I would like to go back to what Paloma also underscored regarding the opportunity to implement the policies and the regulations that exist already in the country and making them more pervasive, materializing them in all ministries and making sure that all initiatives and the acceleration of the road towards circular economy is crystallized. If we manage to do that, then we would have spaces for the training and for the creation of new needs and jobs associated to those processes and those pathways. And that is of the utmost important, because if circular economy is included in the different sub-projects of public and private investments or others, and if public policies already consecrate that, it would open the door to the generation of many jobs related to these processes. As Ana Belén was saying, with examples in the textile industry or the industry on the conversion of soils, circular economies are very broad, and we need to raise more awareness. And I congratulate you for having generated this space, and I would like to continue to discuss that in understanding what circular economy involves. If we specialize in research and technology further as a state, and the ecosystem for sustainability in the country and in the universities, in the academia are promoted, we will continue to work on identifying those opportunities. With the examples that Ana Belén was giving us, we had taken the veil from our eyes and have now opened our eyes to seeing what the different spaces and sectors in the academia are, and working with the state and with all organizations and with cooperation, as Paola was saying. So understanding what other countries are doing, no need to create anything new. What are other countries doing? What are the trends? That's what Luis was saying.
¿Cuáles son esas oportunidades y unirlas?
We will identify what our opportunities are, and we have to join them. And to the extent we can do that, we will link that to the circular economy thing. And then we have to keep on training people to make sure that we can identify such opportunities and strengthen the jobs. And as Paloma was saying, often the recycling systems are already there. There's a big potential. We have to take care of them. And along those lines, there are other companies, the SMEs. More than 99% of the companies in Peru are SMEs, and we have to include them, to empower them. And finally, incentives from the state, which doesn't mean tax incentives, but to understand how we can accelerate all together the different paths that we have to follow to make sure that we make it to the end result that has such an important social and environmental impact. Thank you, Veronica. We now give the floor to Paloma Roldan. I would like to focus on 3 challenges that are along the same lines. First of all, one of the main challenges relates to the intersectorial dialogue and the possibility of using things that are already there. For example, we know that we have a very informality rate, and that we need economic incentives, and that we have social programs that could be added so that certain populations constitute a map where we can develop a number of pilot programs or scale up other proposals so that we can add, so that adding circular economy is an option to these other social programs or programs that we have to carry out. And there again, we have to see how to make regional alliances, partnerships, to see what has worked from, for example, the chambers of commerce of some friends and neighboring countries, to see how we can have a cooperation roundtable. The second issue has to do with training. Again, this is something that everybody has mentioned. We know how complex the issue is. And here again, we need two important things. On the one hand, one of the main challenges is to train and develop. And we need to walk the capacity building road. And the second is how we get an effective constitution. For example, in the case of the recyclers, more than 50% have not finished grade school. So we do have a problem there. We need proposals adapted to the realities and the possibilities that different social and economic actors have to have an actual inclusion. Of course, there are things that are underway. The Ministry of Labor already has some proposals for recyclers, but we have to go beyond. What will happen? How do we include them, knowing that we have problems with dropout and other topics that we have to resolve? And finally, I think that when we talk about the ecosystem, I love this idea that was mentioned before in the inclusive sectors. If we talk about schools, we talk about transversal. The circular economy should be transverse. It should cover everything that are laterally linked. Why? Well, because what we need, and this is the biggest challenge, is to make sure that as a society we change the paradigm, not only the production paradigm, but also the way we relate to each other with the resources around us, and to be more consistent with the country proposals, a country with endless resources that is not so, and how to finally lead that towards a rationale where services and products are being provided that will continue the rationale, and where the linear production model is no longer valid. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I will now make a brief synthesis on these answers. We have talked about informality. Of course, it is a very important challenge where the change starts. We have to include the education and the labor market, more teaching. The university here provides a big opportunity that we should take advantage of. The configuration, public and private partnership to create jobs linked to circular economy. Also, what Veronica said, the possibilities of the SMEs that are so numerous in Peru, to relate them to the circular economy. And there again, I have a number of pilot programs, as mentioned by Paloma, on the seed capitals, how to introduce them, the regional alliances with other countries. Everything is very rich because we do have materials and resources, but sometimes we don't have ideas, and we have to know what other people do and not leave aside the gender issue and the capacity building actions. And this is what I would remain. And to close this panel, we can say that the just transition we're talking about will eliminate jobs, of course, but it will also generate new possibilities. The social inclusion opportunities in the long run will depend on the presence of a labor force with the education and the skills needed. For a just transition, we need everybody to be involved, more sustainable societies, more capacity building, and we have to enforce the circular economy by enforcing and empowering those who are working in it. It is a chain, it is a symbiosis, it is linking the waste products of others that can be used by the third party. It means changing paradigms. If we can change the circular economy issue with decent jobs, green jobs, that is already implicit in the circular economy, and a just income, and with gender inclusion, and also to avoid the geographic divide, we can make some headway. This being said, I wish to thank every member of the panel for their presentation, and that is how the second part of our plenary today, Circular Economy, Fair Jobs and Decent Jobs, is finished. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you for your participation, for your moderation, and of course, thank you to the panel members of such an inspiring plenary, where we have been able to talk more about the topic. Now we will start the roundtable Cooperativism and Circular Economy, which will count on the participation of national and international participants. It will be moderated by Mr. Pedro Hernandez, and member of the group of cooperativism, SMEs, rural development and solidarity endeavors in the EU and Latin America. He works for the University of Alicante in Spain, and we wish him a big welcome. Sir, you have the floor. Good afternoon, all of you. It is a pleasure to be able to share with you and being the moderator of this round table, looking for the promotion of exchange of ideas on the role of cooperativism as a business model, so that they can have a role in a just and decentralized transition towards a circular economy model in Peru, and I imagine in every other country, because the cooperatives are the forms that are very often seen as a little bit backward, but they can be one of the key elements for a circular economy. So, for this roundtable, we have the participation of the following panel members. We have Mr. Jose Maria Fernandez, Director of Circular Economy of the Public Society of the Environmental Management of the Basque Government, Mr. Santiago Paz, Manager of the Norandino Agricultural Cooperative in Peru, Mr. Mauricio Centeno, co-founder and director for circular innovation in Circulus.com and consultant of the University of the Catholic University of Colombia. And finally, Mr. Miguel Vasquez, director of Association Philosophy and Entrepreneurial Development of the Ministry of Agriculture in Peru. So we have a quite diverse roundtable with a number of opportunities to provide us with their opinions. Maybe to trigger the topic, I think that we would have to start from the understanding that the circular economy, and we have seen that over these past days of this fourth international forum on circular economy, that although in the beginning it was introduced as something that would help us managing the resources and recycling, we have to understand that circular economy means a new paradigm, a way of understanding the economic relationships in the world and the social networks around it, which means that the present system has to be acknowledged as having its own limitations. The present paradigm has its limitations because the resources are scarce, and that's why we stem, and that's why some people are already looking in space to see if we can find some new resources far away from the Earth. But at any rate, it means acknowledging a very clear way, in a very clear fashion, that we have our limitations. So what is the solution considering this limit? How can we take advantage of them and be sustainable? And the first thing is the resilience and sustainability of the system, that is to create business opportunities that are sustainable business, that can have a social principle behind. So we're talking about an inclusive and sustainable model of economy, which leads us to another way of understanding life. Who has to understand, and who has to change the way we think? Everybody. Companies, governments, citizens, consumers. It is a notion that will wish for the participation and cooperation of everybody by what this new paradigm means within our economic relationships, which in turn leads us to the fact that the efficiency of resources will be something of the essence, and that we have to understand that the products and services, before they are generated, we have to think that they are limited, and therefore from their very inception we have to anticipate, and not until that, now that we had resources and because we still have them, we're still using them. No. We first have to understand that we need more innovation, more ideas to change the paradigm of the consumption pattern. We also have to acknowledge that we must understand that these are the limits, and that we have to demand that the same products are made with a lower demand or pressure on the inputs. It will mean more R&D, more innovation to offer to the consumers something that they need, certainly, yes, but they don't need it the way it has been done so far. So it's an economic model, and it's a way of understanding life. The cooperative can be an element that is key in itself. According to its definition, it's an autonomous association of people who join voluntarily to satisfy their needs in economic, cultural, and personal activities in their own economic environment and geographic and social environment as well. So it's a company that allows to manage a number of resources together and in a solidary fashion. Therefore, the cooperative can, of course, be part of the circular economy as another element of this just and decentralized transition to the circular economy, which is the purpose of this meeting. And the principles of the circular economy are closely linked. The cooperative is very closely linked to the circular economy. So these things being considered, we will start with a round of questions to the panel members in the order in which I introduced them. And we will have a first question Then there will be an answer by these members, and then there will be a second question. So let's start with the question. What is the role and the importance of cooperatives in circular economy? What role can it play? What is the importance of cooperatives in this transition towards a circular economy? What can they contribute to? Well, and these are many questions all bundled in one, and we hope that the panel members will be in a position to answer by giving us their own point of view. The first one on my list is Mr. José María Fernández. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you, Pedro. And I want to greet all of the panel members in this fourth forum, international forum on circular economy. He, in this case, from Bilbao, Spain, from Euskadi, the Basque Country, a region in the north of Spain. Here, the cooperatives play a very important role regarding the economic weight they represent in our economy. For those who do not know us, I will give you some data. We are a small country, a small region, only 2 million inhabitants in our region, with a very strong activity in different industrial sectors. 24% of the GDP is related to the industrial activity, and in different sectors, the cooperativism has had a very strong presence. I will give you some figures for the Basque Country. We have more than 1,300 cooperatives in all fields. That is industrial, economic, finance, association, in the companies and the social. Specifically in the industrial field, these 1,300 represent 59,000 jobs, 100 billion euros in revenues, and more than 12% of the Basque Country comes from the cooperatives. This is the setting. And as Pedro was saying, I would look for the definition of a cooperative to understand the role of this model from the standpoint of the circular economy. In other words, a cooperative goes well beyond the development of an economic activity. We also find the social protection of members, satisfaction of their needs, and a very important connection with the community. These are principles that make a difference between a cooperative and a private company. And these differences allow us to better relate us to circular economy. Why? Well, because as has been mentioned before, circular economy goes well beyond the resources seen as a new resource. Probably the last strategy possible is that the circular economy calls us to a change in paradigm in production and consumption, which has an impact on every single citizen as consumers of products and services, of goods and services, and how we bring these activities and people on board. And therefore, in a circular economy model, we find things like partnership, training, social aspects, which are also very special. Therefore, and responding to your question, I consider that cooperatives must play a very important role as one of the elements to accelerate this transition process towards a circular model. I would like to underscore that in this transition element, we find two issues that play that particular role. The first one is linked to training. Why? Well, because within an cooperatives model, we take care about the people, because those people are not only workers, they're also partners. And therefore, partner and the social aspects of training, of a fair job, is part of their DNA. And when we analyze these transition models towards a circular economy, we see that we are talking about new ways of consuming, and hence from that perspective, from the change in paradigm, the way they have been thought before, well before their arrival to the market, we have everything in mind, and that is the element I would like to underscore. The second one is the importance of their relationship with the environment. And here I would like to underscore the relocation of the industrial activities and why it is important that the value is being created throughout this model, and that it means a getting closeness between the services and the useful shelf life and the management of the end of cycle. That is why the notion of cooperatives as a local instrument that is on the territory, that can have their own contribution of value, not only to the value chain and the long-term life cycle of a product, but to the whole process, they can contribute permanently to the different stages of the life cycle, because precisely they are connected to the way we consume. As a conclusion, of course, we can have some time later on, the role of cooperatives is extremely important, and I believe that there are elements that make sure that the cooperatives are not only an additional agent towards the circular economy, but that they have a very important role to play vis-a-vis the other members of the economic canvas. Thank you, Jose Maria, for your intervention. We now give the floor to Mr. Santiago Paz, General Manager of the Peruvian Agricultural Cooperative. Thank you for this invitation to this very important forum. My name is Santiago Paz. I'm a commercial manager of one cooperative. I think that cooperatives are leaders in many topics that are important, and for reasons of time, I will give you just a few scattered data. In Peru, in 1990, we produced 1 million quintals of coffee. That is, a quintal is 50 kilograms. Today, 5 million. We exported 80 million, and today exports 700 million. So if we turn to cocoa, it has been even greater and much more spectacular, so to say. In the year 90, we produced 20,000 tons of cocoa, and today we have 135,000 tons, and out of 12 million that were exported, today it is 280 million US dollars. In other words, the cooperatives in Peru have been the pioneers. They are behind the momentum of this process. Before that, Peru was known for making a very low quality product. We had many problems. The cooperatives have therefore contributed to increasing productivity and above all to enhance the treatment post-harvest, to train the producers, to treat the waters, the wastewaters, to lower the contamination and pollution levels. So cooperatives do indeed play a very important role with leaders in the organic production, in a sustainable production, a coffee and a cocoa that are made within an agricultural and forestry system. There's also an initiative by the EU that is concerned about deforestation in the world, and they say that they have selected some products, and that products coming from areas that have been deforested will not be sold in Europe. And I think we have done a lot of headway because we have a sustainable production, because we have some areas that are geo-referenced already. And just to give you one practical example, I work in a cooperative that has 7,000 producers. So we are doing many things that have to do with the circular economy. But I will start by the last project as a cooperative. We are leaders in the topic of reforestation. We have a project that is unfolding with 11 communities with 500 producers, and we are reforesting 500 hectares for the production of water. But these hectares relate to carbon bonds. So in order to be able to sell carbon bonds on the market, first you have to be accepted through a number of very complicated technical standards. It's a complicated procedure, and our cooperative, according to the information I have, it is the only one in the world that sells carbon bonds under a gold standard and under the certification of carbon fix. So as an organization, we have made a lot of headway with the production of coffee, with a production that is both sustainable and long-term, because the coffee grows with an agriculture and forestry system. We already have an organic certification system, a certification of just trade, and a number of other certificates that have to be added with the topic of the organic fertilization, where we are pioneers in the world, and the non-use of agrochemicals.
Y que debería estar al centro de la mesa de todos estos debates, porque también hay otro debate del tema de sostenibilidad. O sea, hoy día, en este contexto, todo el mundo habla de sostenibilidad, pero están hablando de sostenibilidad ambiental, de sostenibilidad social, pero lamentablemente nadie quiere hablar de sostenibilidad, digamos, económica, ¿no? En caso concreto, por ejemplo, ¿no? El precio del cacao por 10 años se mantuvo en un nivel de $3,000. Tuvimos un contexto de precios altos por 10 años y estuvo a nivel de $3,000. Y bueno, también lo que está demostrado también que hoy...
It went up to $3,000. And now, with the crisis and with everything going on, with the distortions of economy at the world level, we have no more benchmark in terms of pricing, because the pricing of cocoa is no longer set according to offer and demand. In market exchanges and stock markets, there's a lot of speculation with pricing. So the situation and what's happened with cocoa is that prices that the producers are paid went down to about $1,000, but market prices did not drop. So if we speak of word production of roughly 5 million tons times 1,000, which is the price producers are paid per ton, that's definitely money that has gone elsewhere in the chain. And cocoa is a business worth $100,000 million, $100 billion, and only 5% of that is what the producer is paid. So in all of these initiatives, we definitely need to discuss fair pricing, economic viability and sustainability for the producers. We speak a lot of circular economy and sustainability, but no one wants to deal with economic sustainability and fair pricing. And we consider that that needs to be at the heart of the debate. And in that regard, cooperatives have been at the forefront. We have seen a great breakthrough. We had the Fair Trade certification, which is the only one. Well, there are a series of certifications, but taking this trend and this concern by consumers, we see that there's a number of initiatives that speak of sustainability. And in that sense, cooperatives have once again been pioneers because the certification of fair trade is the only one establishing a minimum fair price for the producer. And speaking of particular cases that show how it is possible to establish minimum pricing in a context where we don't have price indicators, well, that is the strategy that we have. In our cooperative, we gather 7,000 small producers. We export about 300 containers of coffee. We export 2,500 tons of cocoa. We export about 2,500 tons of panela, which is a sort of less refined sugar, and that has a lot to do with circular economy. And in this job, we have convinced a group of chocolate manufacturers to pay a bit more, to pay a price that makes up for the effort that the producers do to produce quality products and sustainable products. And that shows that the market and the consumer are willing to pay that, and that the price is fair to the market, to the consumer and the producer. Thank you. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for this presentation and for the examples of your cooperative, and because it truly exemplifies what we're discussing. I will now yield to Mr. Mauricio Centeno. Mauricio, go ahead. Mauricio speaking. Hi, Pedro, and hi, everyone. Thank you for your presentations. Everything that we have heard over the past few days has been very interesting. My participation will be divided into two. First, I will speak not so much of the importance of cooperatives in the context of our transition towards circular economy, but of the potential that we need to understand. What is the potential? Well, I think that can be reflected on what has been going on in other contexts and in the Latin American context, because we see the great opportunities that are there today. The cooperatives are nothing new. There's about 1 million members involved in the movement around the world. According to the International Cooperatives Agency, we see that roughly 10% of global employment is generated by these organizations and by following this model. Out of all the cooperatives that exist in the world, a great share is based in Europe, which generates 11 million jobs, and that's 6% of the employment in the region. That's what it accounts for. And so I think we need to look into that glass. And sometimes the perception of the cooperative model is very much related and thought of as pertaining certain activities such as recycling, the agriculture activities and crafts. But we need to be able to implement business models and technologies and new chains in terms of circular economy and in the generation of clean energy that come from the cooperative movement, because there are many opportunities to be seized there. And in these structures with the huge social cohesion, which enable a more equitable development for all participants and for the people in the context where they operate, and Jose Maria knows the case of the Basque Country very well. And we can say clearly there, but I think we need to get to that level, not leave it at small producers of fruit or small craftspeople. No, on the contrary, we should speak of what Denmark achieved by having 23% of its wind power generation through cooperative models. In Mexico, 65% of the territory could be used to generate solar power and 85% with photovoltaic technologies. And that is not the case today. That's the potential. And a great share of the production of biofuels in Brazil is produced by following these models. In Canada, a few years ago, they already had 70% of generation of renewable energies through cooperative models. And in other contexts, such as Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia, a city where roughly 10 to 12 million people interact every day, well, they have 17 cooperatives that are grouped into the Federation of Recyclers. It is through these types of organizations that over 5,000 people work on an everyday basis to support the urban needs. So I wanted to talk to you about potential to let you see how much more cooperatives can be than what we see. We have a great business opportunity there, great development opportunities. And when governments begin to plan their transition towards circular economy, well, this model is very powerful and it needs to be considered because it can generate mass jobs and it allows us to reuse many resources that are being lost today, given the dynamics of the market and our productive systems. And that is our starting point, but we cannot leave it there. We need to think of innovation. We need to think that cooperatives will give us models of repair. So there will be people with a technical profile, but there will also be many PhDs and researchers needed from the academia for the innovation sector. So this is a wide spectrum, a wide range where we will need to train people at different levels to be able to generate all of these skills necessary for the model of collaboration. In the Latin American case, we know over the next 15 years, we will reach a level of population concentration in urban areas of 70%. The challenge is huge. We need to know how to meet the needs of all these people in the cities, because the cities are not prepared in terms of infrastructure and utilities, and what will happen to the areas that these people come from, areas that are abandoned. And we get our water, our natural resources, our energy, our food from those areas. So how can we, out of the cities, generate everything needed to meet the needs of the city if the people are living? And then there's the lack of employment opportunities in their particular contexts as well. So how can cooperatives help end these systemic issues? So rurality, how to make sure people stay in the rural areas with better living conditions by using all these resources and helping them become suppliers of all these services, all the products that the big industries in the cities need, and the industries are usually in the cities. And then on the other hand, these urban or peri-urban cooperatives, which begin to support the transition in the city, also need our help. We need the generation of clean fuel, infrastructure for mobility based on these new models and technologies that are easy to implement. We speak of the production of food and how the digital technology can be embedded into that to facilitate the project. The person who spoke before me mentioned the market dynamics where the producer earns only 5% of the profits from a sector. So how can digital economy help us break the intermediaries chain to create a much fairer model in commercial terms, but to make sure that the digital economy could also allow small producers and local producers to begin to diversify their activities? We speak here of the context of localization. We are facing a globalization that is unsustainable. There are many evil effects that we are seeing today, and globalization will allow us to combine the export of added value, the consumption of a more aware way in more local context, and that will also lead to having better products, healthier products to us, the consumers, but also to the earth and the cities. So there's a huge misconception in thinking global change, climate change is to be solved by the more developed economies or by the industries that have generated the greenhouse effect. We need to think of decarbonizing our local areas, because that is where the air is being polluted with, the earth is being damaged, where we're consuming microplastics with all sorts of foods. So cooperatives need to be integrated as an opportunity to create new jobs, but also to begin to decarbonize and recircularize the needs of the urban areas. Thank you. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you for that intervention, Mauricio. Let's now give the floor to the next panelist, Mr. Miguel Vasquez, the Director of Associativity and Company Development of the Midagri in Peru. Go ahead. The interpreter apologizes. We're not hearing Miguel. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Miguel, are you still with us? Miguel Vasquez speaking. Yes, sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now? Pedro Hernandez, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead. Miguel Vasquez speaking. Well, on this subject, the first thing I would like to say is that the promotion of circular economy in Peru is in line with the national competitiveness and productivity policy, and specifically with our priority objective number 9, which establishes the promotion of environmental sustainability in our economic activities by promoting family economies. But it's also important to know that the fact that the national policy is mandatory, where the public sector and the Midagri in particular, where I work and where I am the director of company development and associativity, we need to deal with what the origin of collaborative work is in Peru. In Peru, cooperatives are what predominates, and our model makes us extract, produce, consume, reject, and throw out. And now we have a cyclic production model where we extract, we transform, we consume, and we need to begin recovering waste and reusing it. That is a part of our purpose, but that requires a strong research component, a component of development and innovation. Which are the stakeholders of agriculture in Peru which are in the position of developing this? In the current structure of Peru, circular economy can have a strong boost within a scenario where 97% of agricultural producers are family businesses, where over 800,000 family producers live in survival conditions. They will develop the circular economy. So when we think of circular economy in Peru, we think of those who are considered as cooperatives, but can all rural cooperatives develop the circular economy? We have nearly 500 cooperative unions grouping over 130,000 agricultural producers in Peru. They each have their own level of organizational development, business development, but there is only a small sector, a minor sector, which is involved in these export chains of cocoa, coffee, and banana, as the manager of Norandino said, and they are involved in circular economy, but how much do they account for overall within agricultural producers in Peru? Well, if 6% of producers are organized in cooperatives, and that accounts for 130,000 people, I would say at most there will be 60,000 producers involved in circular economy. But is it possible to generate a change with this scenario? Well, what's clear is that from this universe, we can say cooperatives have an important role to play for the development of circular economy. They must be the model, but the model must start with a reality, and that is the huge level of disintegration which exists with our family producers. Disintegration which prevents them from developing competitive offers, developing an offer that can implement circular economy and its processes and values. And then there's also the lack of economic integration. So I think that's where the problem lies. Although it is true that circular economy is part of an important public policy to the country, the level of development it has will always be limited unless we get a strong component involved with a view to developing the articulation of producers. And I think that is the outlook we must all have, because we want circular economy to be more than words. We want to shift from linear to circular economy to follow the mechanisms of integration of our producers. And with that in mind, the Ministry of Agricultural Development and Irrigation has undertaken a commitment, and we intend to consolidate the integration of producers so that they can develop in the benefit of all, so that we can all have a better place to live. And that would be achieved through circular economy. That's my first part. I understand there will be 2 interventions for each. So I have a number of other considerations to share in my second intervention. Thank you. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. I'll try to sum up what we've discussed so far. I think it all transmits the different views of the different panelists. Jose Maria Fernandez insisted on the importance of cooperatives because it focuses on 2 important elements, people and their environment, which are also keys to circular economy. Mr. Santiago Paz, the manager of Norandino, also focused on sustainability and its economic implications. Economic viability is often the factor that tends to be left out, but without economic viability, there cannot be full sustainability for any project. So that concept of economic viability has also been a great contribution from Mr. Santiago Paz. As for Mauricio, I thought it was very interesting to hear him speak of the integration of new sectors. We must always think of all sectors, not just the traditional one. We must bet on new business opportunities and new sectors, such as clean energy. And lastly, Mr. Miguel Vasquez highlighted the need for public policies and research. He also touched upon another important issue in the case of cooperatives, which is the integration of small producers as a mechanism of synchronization facing circular economy and our pathway towards it. They need that empowerment and that support in order to achieve it. So we have seen what the different perspectives are in this regard. Now, if anyone wishes to add anything to this, I will now allow it. So, Jose Maria, anything to add? Jose Maria Fernandez speaking. Well, thank you, Pedro. I would like to think of the reality of the cooperatives movement in the Basque Country, and I would like to go back to something Mauricio was saying, and that is the need to make cooperatives more visible as a useful instrument in different economic environments, in different sectors. We need to go beyond the cooperative models that we already know and we can only understand in the sectors that we have known them traditionally, which is crafts and primary products. And we need to show the capability of cooperatives to deal with and to respond to sectors with a high component of innovation, with a high added value. And perhaps in the second question, we will be able to insist some more on how to convey these aspects. But I think there is a key aspect here. Cooperatives could likely run the risk of being weak elements in terms of their capability of having their own resources to face important elements such as innovation, training, research in the development of new products, and knowing how to face the new business models that circular economy confronts them with. In the Basque country, we've been working for many years on the enhancement of the cooperative movement from our administration. So I would like to stress here a number of elements which I consider to be key. The first of which is how can we manage to make sure there is collaboration between the different cooperatives? How can we find integration elements to join forces where we can? In the Basque country, for instance, we have different organizations which are sectorial. They're all cooperatives, but each from a different sector. And together they make up the cooperation of the Basque country's cooperatives. That allows us to have a better communication with the government and to better analyze what our needs are and how to encourage the movement. The CONFECOP, that Confederation of Cooperatives, is an important element, but it is not the only one. There's further the Higher Council of Cooperatives of the Basque Country, which is a structure that's created and regulated by a specific law regulating the activities of cooperatives, which we have in the Basque Country, but which allows us to make sure the representatives of the different sectorial cooperative associations can sit around one same table with the government and with the academia. The purpose of this Higher Council of Cooperatives of the Basque Country is to become an advisory organ to discuss and advise on how to face the challenges for the cooperative sector. One last matter I would like to underline is the fact that we have created what we call cooperatives of the second degree. That would be the CARLAN. It is a non-profit cooperative created by the cooperativist movement with the view to promoting the development of new cooperative companies and to create cooperative jobs and for the social and economic development of our region. So those are the two main messages I would like you to take away. So first, we need to show the cooperatives as an instrument to generate wealth, and that is valid in any sector, even those which would have a high technological component and therefore require high levels of innovation elements. And then for that, we need to show how to enhance the cooperativist element. And for that, we underscore our coordination, collaboration, and with the boost, which here we have found from the Basque government, which is a great value for cooperatives and which needs to be enhanced with the support of public administrations in general. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you very much, Jose Maria. Let's now give the floor to Santiago Paz and see if he wants to add anything else to his first answer. Santiago Paz speaking. I agree with the other panelists. In the case of Peru, we speak not of minor impacts, but of great impacts, economic impacts, social impacts, political impacts, which are clear. Our producers' associations export roughly 20% of their production. There is a very clear economic impact There are social impacts as well, which have to do with training from the producers, which has allowed for the improvement of the quality of products. As I was saying, in 1990, Peru was globally famous as a country that produced low-quality coffee, and that's changed. We have managed to raise our stock market positioning. We are now known as a country which produces quality products in the case of cocoa and in the case of many other products. Circular economy, as has been said so far, is cross-sectoral. So cooperatives here are pioneers in the trends which very often start in the north, over in Europe, and then get to our countries. So we have made quite some progress in gender equality here, which is none other than recognizing that men and women need to have the same rights and the same opportunities. So it's not a minor impact, as you see. This impact is significant. That is why I only shared 2 statistics for the coffee and cocoa sectors. Owing to the little time we have, I focused on economic issues and aspects. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you very much, Santiago. It is now Mauricio's turn to go into greater detail and to debate on what we've been discussing. Mauricio Centeno. Thank you, Pedro. We have 2 big challenges and very little time to solve them. Climate emergency, which requires us to decarbonize our economies, and then development where no one's left behind. It is true that Latin America is one of the most vulnerable regions. And I'm going to share some statistics from the Mexican case, but we know that this is common to the entire region. In Mexico, in the pandemic alone, we saw a rise in the number of poors we have. We now have 10 million new poors, people who are now categorized as living in conditions of poverty, and 20% of them in extreme poverty. So that is a huge challenge that needs to be dealt with right away. Circular economy and cooperatives are 2 mechanisms which could be united. And if one fosters the other, that could help us generate a lot of value and have a more redistributive economy. That's why I mentioned energy. If in some communities the economic activity is impacted in productivity because they do not even have access to clean energy or to energetic sovereignty, then they will never make it out of that poverty trap that they're in. So we need to start with being able to generate clean energy, to establish new models to adopt cleaner technologies and cleaner energies, and to make these cooperatives a driver for the development of the communities where there's other kinds of economic activities, some which may be traditional and others may be business opportunities that appear in the context of circular economy, both in rural communities which may not even be connected to the energy grid of the country, but also in the context of the urban and peri-urban areas where the dynamics and the issues are very different, where there's many vulnerabilities and where we need to regenerate the social mesh, which generates other types of issues related to insecurity, public health, etc. So, and this systemic perspective that was mentioned in the panel that preceded us, I think we need to see how to connect the generation of higher quality jobs through activities in circular economy, but from these organizational structures, because it's not a condition that is outside of what happens elsewhere. 92% of the entrepreneurial community in Latin America are micro SMEs. That's just the case in Europe. So how can we support these structures which add value to the value chains? And I think we need to begin to ask ourselves the question so that the different leaders from the public and private sector, the academia, etc., can begin to work on how to solve the issue. It cannot be solved by a single sector or with a single strategy. We need multidisciplinary approaches and many different sectors to get involved. We cannot wait to have the perfect regulatory frameworks to get to work. We need to get to work right away. And a number of regulations already allow for the implementation of new technologies, the generation of clean energy, the distribution of what is generated at a small scale. So we need to work on that. And that, I'm sure, will promote the adoption of new technologies which aren't even in the agenda, given these new opportunities that are being exploited, given the high impact context of cooperatives. So I'm going to ask that of you. I'm going to ask you to consider it. We need to see how to integrate that into our work environments. Thank you.
So now, thank you very much, Mauricio. If Miguel, would you like to make any contribution to the importance of the topics that we have been discussing? Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So the question was if the cooperatives can, of course, apply family economy, because a cooperative has a development model related to the protection of biodiversity, the correct use of technology, an ecological equation, and a strong commitment to biodiversity. We think that agricultural cooperatives are good for the benefit of farmers, for sustainable agribusiness, and these farmers can adopt circular economic practices. And the problem lies not there because there is a strong commitment to the preservation of the environment. In Peru, cooperatives have ratified the Green Pact back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And in 2011, 2012, there was a big meeting, and these cooperatives have ratified and signed this agreement. However, the problem lies in developing strategies for this process to be more powerful. And in concrete terms, the Office for Business Associations at the Ministry has 3 strategies in place. The first one seeks to promote a process with the involvement of both public and private actors in order to create agricultural cooperatives. Our goal for 2026 is to create 300 new cooperatives, and also to engage in the transformation of these cooperatives in order to perfect the association model. And our goal for 2024 is to transform or promote the transformation of 250 farming associations and transform them into cooperatives. And the biggest goal, because only this kind of cooperative system, which is competitive, can make it possible to apply the processes which are connected to the implementation of circular economy. And I mean the strengthening of over 500 cooperatives by 2026. So basically, this is our mission. We think we can make a contribution to the development of and implementation of circular economy in Peru. There are loads of bibliography and papers on this issue. Norandino is one of them, but this process, for this process to be effective and efficient, it has to become a mass project, and that's our current objective. That's the contribution I wanted to make. Thank you. Thank you very much, Miguel, for your contribution on the role of cooperatives and the plans of the ministry. Now, to delve into the second question and the second section, I would like to act as the devil's advocate right now, because we all agree that cooperatives have and will have a big impact on the circular economy. And we have reached this conclusion, all of us. But to be the devil's advocate, we have to think that in order to apply these circular economy strategies, as Mauricio said, we have to think how to apply them, how to focus on their relevance. So their issues have always cropped up regarding the way in which these strategies can be implemented. And these barriers, these obstacles might be bigger or smaller. You know, sometimes we get the feeling that this engagement by people in general will not focus on economic benefit. And sometimes they want to focus on their own interests. Sometimes there is no innovation. And all of this makes me think of this inherent problem. How can we face, how can cooperatives develop strategies to implement circular economy? So, Jose Maria, you have the floor. Thank you, Pedro. I think it's a wonderful question, because to have to analyze the weaknesses endured by cooperatives for them to face this new stage. And you have highlighted some of these elements. And sometimes we have to give support to some of them in order to combat these barriers. We need a systemic view to support cooperatives for them to face their barriers and obstacles. I tried to highlight the first one in my first presentation, the need to work as a team, because there are shortcomings that you have mentioned. There are barriers. We might add competition and rivalry between some cooperatives. And there are other big players in the economic sector and multinationals. And sometimes it's very difficult for cooperatives, if they don't work as one, to face and deal with these large companies. It's also necessary to promote innovation. And how can we do it? For cooperatives to be more innovative. Innovation will be necessary for cooperatives. Another aspect which might prove to be complex is access to funding, access to investment funds that might allow them to face technological barriers for the adoption of new technology, And probably the last aspect, which has to do with surveillance and the market, the knowledge of the market. So the cooperatives should be stay forward vis-a-vis the market. What you have asked, well, it's very interesting. In Peru, you can see these fair trade certificates, carbon credits, and sometimes it's very difficult. It's very difficult for cooperatives. I think these are the liabilities, I would say. But then you have the assets on this balance sheet. First, there is a concern about the generation of value, the creation of wealth, but not an economic benefit only. Of course, it's like adding value in general, not economic value only. Being close to the territory, close to the field, flexibility to get adjusted. to get adapted to new business models in order to face these challenges, to take advantage of these skills among cooperatives. I would like to mention how we within the Basque government, we are promoting an improvement, the enhancement of cooperatives with a view on circularity. And we're working in two different areas, different but complementary. So we have a plan, a strategy with a horizon on 2030. We have set some very ambitious goals, increasing productivity by 30% in our economy and creating more value using fewer resources, increasing secondary commodities or raw materials by 30% and reduce the production of waste. And around 1,000 new green jobs. This is a strategy which is associated to measures to solve these problems I mentioned, access to funding, the creation of a circular economy observatory in order to challenge these, to face these challenges, and also plans for joint innovation. You see, this is some of the areas we in the government are working on. The second element is what we call the Basque program for the 2030 agenda priorities, based on several pillars: people, equity and equality, poverty eradication, inequality reduction, and no social exclusion. We want to promote an inclusive education, including these values in the school curriculum. And another pillar has to do with the planet, ecology. And we are promoting through a special project the creation of cooperatives. That's, cooperatives for electricity generation, because we want new cooperatives to generate renewable energy to combat climate change. And we want to foster the transformation of our cities with a greener and more inclusive ecosystem, including cooperatives in this task. And the third pillar is related to the prosperity of our territory, the prosperity of our region, based on solidarity. This is an approach in where we share our concern for public health, bringing everyone together based on mechanisms of private-public mechanisms based on, in turn, co-responsibility. We have a specific program and initiative seeking to create links for cooperation and collaboration, not only within cooperatives, but with other players in society. So it is necessary to adopt a systemic approach to enforce cooperatives' skills and capacities to face this challenge, the challenge of a new circular economy. And to conclude, I would like to make a couple of comments about something that happened back in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. You see, this global crisis that emerged that had to do with medical protection equipment, the government detected a need. You know, there were no face masks in Spain. So, and supply chains were completely disrupted. So medical supplies did not arrive on time, or did not arrive at all, and we had to develop new supply chains. How were we able to meet this need? Well, through local cooperatives. Very, very fast, they were able to develop a new production chain. And there was a record, just 2 months, we were able to develop production chains in order to produce face masks. And this initiative was based on our cooperatives and their efforts. Thanks to this approach, taking into account the environment, I think it is just a simple example. Cooperatives follow rules which are completely different from those of the private sector. And this is vital. So we have to strengthen cooperatives. Thank you. Thank you, Jose Maria, for your contribution. And now I give the floor to Santiago. So what can cooperatives do? Can cooperatives adopt circular economy? Well, I would like to stick to a concrete example. Our cooperative is located in north of Peru. It brings together 7,000 producers or farmers, and here we produce a great portion of Peruvian coffee. We have set up a plant to process cocoa. This is a leading project because all the added value, normally it takes place in Europe. I mean, the addition of value. It's very difficult to add value here. And here, this plant processes cocoa from Peru and from other Latin American countries. And, I always talk to farmers. And when I talk to farmers, I always tell them, let's speak about the context. We are speaking in what kind of context? We have done all of this in an unfavorable environment, in an adverse environment, where public policies and the government just sought to obliterate us. And now we're facing changes, a change of era, I would say. 1980, well, this liberal model was sort of relaunched through the deregulation of the economy. With an open economy, the globalization of the economy, and the promoters of this policy were Mr. Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher. But, we believe that we are at the historical turning point, the last 30 years of this decadence stage of our society. And this is what we are experiencing day in, day out. So this economic model applied back in the 90s is a recipe seeking to privatize everything, selling everything. So the state had to be minute, tiny. There was no reason for the state to exist. So we are located in the north, in the Piura region. As a result of this model, all the agricultural sector is practically non-existent, practically dead. We had 77,000 hectares of cotton, and now there's nothing, zilch, nil. We have an accelerated process of land concentration. Very, very few farmers can live off the land. Many have sold their land and work for others, for other farmers, or for other people. So this model is exhaustive. You can read all the economic indicators, NASDAQ, Dow Jones, whatever. And it's crazy. This is absolutely crazy because we have an artificial economy caused by deregulation. What we have at present in our hands is that there is a problem with the supply chain. And we are in a bubble because of inflation, international inflation, around 12%. This is a bubble that will definitely explode. So it will blow off. And this model died many years ago. For us, there is a new trend. There is a kind of nationalistic trend, and this nationalistic trend states that we have to stop buying Chinese goods. We have to buy from other countries. That was the example set to us before. So today, there is an opportunity. In Europe, you know, I visited Europe shortly ago, and this trend comes from many years ago. In Europe, there is a strong trend, yeah, focus on local markets, kilometer 0, kilometer 50, yeah, the first miles. You know, it's like a dictatorship, a kind of market dictatorship. So what I would like to say, if we cooperatives have survived despite this adverse context, now we're still amidst a complicated context. This is the era of chaos. This is what we are facing in Peru. We are immersed in chaos. What may happen in Peru? Well, no one knows, but we deeply believe that what we are doing has to do with the new scenario, the new context, a new rurality. See, you know, some are displaced from big cities, and there are many trends at present, but we have to focus on self-management and self-sufficiency. And we believe that change is a change that will come from the bottom up. So all these debates should be framed. I mean, we have been doing circular economy for many, many years. Now it's sort of more powerful. If we have survived these difficult times, well, in a favorable context, we cooperatives will become even stronger. Thank you. Thank you very much, Santiago. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for your force. Thank you for your contribution. I'm sure that cooperatives will definitely bolster our economy. Now it's Mauricio's turn. So what strategies, how can cooperatives apply the circular economy? Well, I think we have two challenges. First, we have to change our mindset. And we have to change the way in which we see or define businesses and chains and the territory for the future, because there will be more people involved and we have limited resources. So we have to recircularize resources. We have to keep creating value. We don't have to waste. We have to keep capturing value once and again. So this system becomes more equitable. So in order to change the mindset, we have to develop technical skills, leadership skills among different sectors. And we have to think and focus on innovation. We have to hack the current model. If we keep making decisions as we have done so far, well, we will be doomed. And maybe the second solution is more systemic. We have to start developing a roadmap. What are the goals? Jose Maria was speaking about concrete goals regarding specific topics. We want to reduce this impact. We want to maximize productivity. We want to generate clean energy. Today, public policy, even strategic plans have very few clear goals. Yeah, sometimes they are based on SDG reports, but we have to set goals. And this begins with a roadmap. I don't have a north where, I mean, I wouldn't know what actions I would need to implement in order to reach this north. So Today, there is no funding, no regulations. We know what is missing, but we cannot embrace the inertia of COP26, just complaining about what is not being done. So we have to make decisions which really materialize. If the legal framework allows me to implement certain technologies, well, that's where I have to begin. Ideally, we should be able to do more things, but we have to start little at least. If we do not take the first step, we will never take the second step. If we have clear goals, if we have a roadmap, a clear roadmap, based on our current technologies and capacities, and we know what we have to do, we will be able to generate specific measures and actions in the chain value out there in the field. And the roadmap will allow us to implement different actions and measures involving different sectors. If the road ahead is not clear, each and every sector will think and focus on their own interests. So we need a more holistic, common view, taking into account the interest of every single sector and all focus on this collective goal. That's the beginning. We, as consultants, entrepreneurs, researchers, we think about how different expertise areas, we are about to launch a new model in Mexico, and the idea is to give strategic support to organizations in all of the Americas. We want to bring more expertise to all the organizations regarding every area, regarding gender perspective, inclusion, territorial development, in order to combine all these elements in our roadmap, whether for a single industry to develop transitional skills, but also for decision makers and those who plan cities, urban planners, because at the end of the day, big impacts take place at the city level. And resource consumption, pollution, employment, informality, all of these are found in urban contexts where you have a huge concentration of people and where you have resources and waste. We have to reach this middle level. For that, we will need roadmaps at the sectoral level, at the business level. And I think the cooperatives will be a great allies, because businesses will not see communities just as groups that have to be kept happy. They have to be brought on board to tap their potential, because these territorial actors can become partners in order for all these organizations to reach other markets. We have been working very hard together with all these expert firms. And through this organization, which is based on collaboration and cooperation, we want to help and assist these partners in urban planning to have an impact on the transformation of the territory. We want to educate, we want to bring technology, and they are profitable. And we need financial resources. And I want to focus on this. Normally, we say there's no funding, and that's true sometimes. Traditional banks, well, normally don't fund cooperatives, especially in the case of Latin American vulnerable cooperatives, but we need to knock on other doors. There are some philanthropy organizations, so these resources might be channeled towards cooperatives, and they might become business partners. Instead of competing based on price, maybe you can fund them or sign a long-term agreement, and they can leverage this funding, and together, you will become partners, and this will provide you with resilience. And we know that this can be a good tool to overcome challenges. And I think that this exercises will allow us to bring together different disciplines to develop the roadmap. We bring other sectors to the table, and the cooperative model becomes an enabler, an enabling mechanism for all these new activities to be actually and effectively implemented. That's it. That is my conclusion. Because mechanisms are out there, they do exist, but we are not using them. We remain seated and comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. Indeed, there seems to be unanimity in the fact that cooperatives are an essential element that can produce a great impact and which are clearly fit for circular economy. We have all stressed the need to support our needs, global needs, and the needs of cooperatives in terms of innovation, leadership, and access to funding, which was also mentioned, for newer means to enable that cooperation. So cooperatives, in a nutshell, need to go on managing and increasing value, and they are capable to do so while implementing strategies, as was the case with Norandino, and the application of policies and support from the government, as Mr. Miguel Vasquez said earlier. Our time is almost up. And so I would like to ask whether at this point any of you wants to make any concluding remarks, any final remarks. Jose Maria? Jose Maria Fernandez speaking. Well, by way of final conclusion, all I want to impress upon you is that the world that we have known, as we have known it, where the world has moved through global supply chains, where trading and production followed globalization structures, well, it's clearly not a circular model. If we wish to transition to a circular model, we need to use relocalization strategies, local consumption strategies, value generation strategies. And in this new approach and this new reality, cooperatives are without a doubt the enabling agent, because they include these very concepts in its DNA, and that goes hand in hand with circular economy. So we have a great future ahead, and I think we should be the protagonists in making sure this becomes a reality. Thank you. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you, Jose Maria. Santiago Paz, any final remarks? Santiago Paz speaking. Well, cooperatives have been around for a long time, and we have actually survived the model for 40 years. I think the current context is new, and we're quite optimistic about the future and what lies ahead. Thank you. That's all from me. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you, Santiago. Indeed. We appreciate your recounting of the new realities. Mauricio Centeno speaking. Yes, I thank you for this space. And to conclude, I would like to quote Ashley Morris, the CEO of FORO, a circular company, which is very simple, and I think it should help begin to change your mindset. And she says we need to prioritize transformation over transactions and cooperation over competition. Thank you. Pedro Hernandez speaking. Thank you very much. Mr. Miguel Vasquez, any final reflections? The interpreter apologizes. Okay, Pedro Hernandez speaking. Okay, this brings us to the end of our roundtable. And I think we now have a clear, accurate opinion on the impact that cooperatives can have in this fair, inclusive, decentralized transition towards circular economy. We all agree in the fact that cooperatives can do it, And those are important factors in this transition. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your presentations and for your exchange in this roundtable. Jessica Moran speaking. Thank you very much, Pedro. This was an excellent panel. We have truly followed your every word. Thank you to the panelists from their different contexts and realities. The discussion has been very enriching. We are now ready then to conclude our activities for today. We thank all presenters, panelists, moderators, and the audience who have been with us for this fourth day of the forum. We hope the information shared here was of value to you and that you are now inspired to become change agents and to join in the process of a fair, decentralized transition as we needed in Peru to move towards an inclusive circular economy. We remind you that our live streaming ends for today. However, activities go on the forum's platform. We would like to invite you to participate in the afternoon's activities. At 3 p.m. Peruvian time, we will have the challenge formalizing the recycling industry in Peru, co-hosted with the National Industry Society. At 4:30 p.m. Peruvian time, we will hold the workshop entitled Circular Economy, from Theory to the Management of Environmental Costs, co-hosted by From Peru. Those who signed up to the challenge or the workshop can join the activity through the Zoom link that you will have received as a confirmation on your email accounts. From 5 to 6 p.m. Peruvian time, we will also hold the side event entitled The Implementation of a Roadmap Towards a Circular Economy in the Industrial Sector within the Framework of Cooperation, which is hosted thanks to the help of the Ministry of Production, where Mrs. Maria Nela Hernandez, the National Coordinator for the Project of Sustainable Industrial Zones Development, and Mr. Jorge Urbina, the National Coordinator of the Project Development of Eco-Industrial Parks in Peru, will be presenting. Access to the side events is free and open, and you can do so by following the links published on the program in the forum's virtual platform. You can also see them on the platform chat. Remember to join early because the number of participants will be limited. You are all welcome to also visit our virtual exhibition available on the forum platform, where you will find 16 stands between circular experiences and organizations leading our transition towards a circular economy in Peru. That's all from me for today. Thank you very much. I encourage you to go on participating in the forum's activities.